Welcome to Hemp Foundation Talks, where we listen to the heartbeats of the hemp industry and learn the celebrations, challenges, and discoveries from hemp leaders and advocates from around the world. I'm Rebecca, International Business Officer with the Hemp Foundation and your host. Today's guest is Matt Marino. Matt Marino is the president and founder at Homeland Hempcrete. He has a background in operations and has focused most of his career on supply chain efficiencies, but has also spent years building, renovating, and managing properties. Early on, when exploring hemp industry, he realized that building with hemp not only aligned with his interests, but also had the opportunity to make a huge impact. His goal now is to make hempcrete more accessible and accelerate the adoption of healthy and sustainable building materials. Founded the same year the U.S. Farm Bill legalized production of industrial hemp, Homeland Hempcrete entered the market utilizing the traditional cast-in-place build method. After years of trial and error, they decided there must be a more effective solution that will decrease install time and get more hempcrete to more customers. The solution they have embraced is pre-made, pre-cured, high-quality modular hemp panels. Their panel system allows for consistent quality, quick and easy install, customized design, and finishes can be applied immediately after install. Hey, Matt, welcome to Hemp Foundation Talks. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. And I know you've been busy building in hemp, so thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. Please just start off by telling us a little bit more about you, your background, and why you're building in hemp right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me. So my name is Matt Marino, and I'm the owner of Homeland Hempcrete. And so we're based in Bismarck, North Dakota. We started in the hemp industry back in 2018 is when we started to dabble with a handful of strategies. Then 2019 is when we started pursuing building with hemp exclusively with hempcrete. We started with the cast in place method, building on site. And that's when we did our first structure, was in 2019. And so learned a lot about the industry and the methods around that time, and just kept building up until last year. We were still doing builds, but we started to kind of transition. And so last year and then the beginning of this year is when we started to move into doing prefabricated hempcrete building, just for the sake of primarily convenience for us. We're in North Dakota, so we have a really short build cycle. So it just makes sense for us to be able to control the environment quite a bit more, and reach a broader scope, because we're in a limited populated area or limited populations. So it's easier to reach more people, moving to that strategy. And so January of this year is when we started producing our first panels. And that's where we're at today.
Awesome. So what got you, where was the shift in you? Because you were doing construction before, just, the typical construction, right? And then what was that shift in you that made you decide, I want to build with hempcrete now? And, can you tell me a little bit more of your why? Why are you doing construction in hemp?
Yeah, good question. So we're loosely involved in construction before hempcrete, because we have rental properties, and so we've been doing renovations and management of those properties for years. And so that's kind of been our affiliation and my exposure to building. And I've just always been tinkering since I was probably 10 years old, building things. And so I think where it really aligned, we used to live in Colorado, and that's where we first were introduced to the hemp industry in general. And just kind of started to dabble. We're on a health kick, and so hemp just naturally, we kind of found it along that journey. And we started as we were going down that path, we started to see more and more opportunities with hemp in general. And that's when I stumbled upon hempcrete for building. And so it just really aligned with my interest, and I saw it as an opportunity to kind of to meld the two worlds together. And I think that's where a lot of these businesses have started, and where we're still at in the hemp industry, where you can pretty much find whatever you're passionate about and whatever gets you excited, you can turn into a business within the hemp industry, because there's just so many applications, and every avenue is still pretty fresh, where there's a lot of room for growth.
Right. What have been some of those challenges? I know that when we talked before, you were talking about, getting it into the building codes or certain things that have to be a requirement to make, hemp building more available, kind of, for the industry to continually grow with building in hemp. So what are some of those challenges that you had spoke with about before, as far as getting it into the code and things like that?
Yeah, that was probably one of the biggest ones. Was so right up until, I guess, 2 weeks ago now, hempcrete was not recognized as an official building material, and so you could still build with it in the U.S., but you'd have to get a variance of sorts from your build officials, saying that we're going to deviate from what's generally accepted, and they might have some extra hoops for you to jump through. They might have engineering drawings, those kinds of things that they need in addition to your traditional plans. So the USHBA has been working for at least the last 6 months. We probably started talks back before Thanksgiving of last year, is when we started to meet and start to put together an appendix for building with hempcrete. And so it was just submitted in January, and then there was a hearing in New York this last month, and it was suggested for approval, which means this year we're in the commentary phase now, where we get to add notes and clarity to the document. But by the end of this year, hempcrete will officially be recognized as a building material. So anyone can go out and build with hempcrete in the U.S. As long as they follow these guidelines within the appendix, essentially. So that's a huge hurdle, and that really brings hempcrete to the stage as a building material where people can go out and use it without much limitation. That's been one of the bigger ones. The other one is materials, raw materials, and that's getting better year by year. And as we have these little wins, well, that's a really big win actually, but wins like this, that helps prove out the viability of the market for people that are like doing the processing, the farming, those kinds of things, to where they're more comfortable investing in the industry, which helps all of us grow and get to a better spot.
Amazing. So you have a play in kind of what are the standards too, and having a voice in that as far as how we're going to use hempcrete in building?
Within the appendix, it's basically a list of best practices, or almost a how-to guide of how every aspect of the build will work. And so that we really did that intentionally, so that there's these are the things we know for sure will work, or most likely to work, based on what we've seen in other industries. So for instance, in places like France, they've been building for 30 plus years with hemp. They have a very good understanding, and so we've adopted a lot of their best practices. We've also taken them from other places around the world, and we compiled them to what we feel most comfortable is a good standard practice. And so that's what makes up the appendix, and that's essentially the guidelines. And then from there, once that's approved, we can start to work in other alternative options and kind of build details as they get tested and proved out. So we don't really want to get ahead of ourselves and open the door wide open and have people guessing and testing and then have failures, because that kind of tarnishes the name. But as we do some well orchestrated testing, we can start to open that door a bit more and give more opportunity for building.
Amazing. So tell me a little bit more of your initiatives on doing the prefab and what that's going to do for the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, the main thing for me, the initial idea was because you really have to be building with hemp in relatively warm temperatures. You don't want to be hitting freezing, those kinds of things. And so I'm in North Dakota. We just got, I just got home from Pennsylvania on Friday, and I came home to 18 inches of snow on the ground in April here. And then we got another 3 or 4 yesterday or the day before on top of that.
Oh my gosh.
So in conclusion, April's not a good month to build with hempcrete. And I've done it before. Last year I was building in April, and it snowed also then, and I had freezing water lines, those kinds of things. So anyway, what I'm getting at is the build cycle is short, or the build season is short in North Dakota, especially for a natural building material. And so I can open that up to I can build them any day of the year when I'm in a controlled facility. And so that was the initial driver for me, was to kind of open up my opportunities for building. The other one that's important is going to be there's a decent amount of cure time associated with hempcrete. And so it's usually a month up to 2 months sometimes, where you have to let those walls, some of the moisture leave those walls so you can start to apply finishes, those kinds of things. You could still be doing other things on the build, but you just can't be doing finishes on the walls. And so that can be prohibitive for moving a build along if you don't plan really well. And where we're at in the industry right now, most people building with hempcrete, we act as subcontractors, and so we don't have too much say in what is happening. A lot of people come and they already have drawings and plans, and contractors already, or subcontractors already hired for various other parts, where they're just plugging in the hempcrete. And so there's not much say at that point, where you really have to be flexible, versus if we come in and we can plan from the start, we can strategize and say, while this is curing, we can be working on other things like internal walls, those kinds of things, the roof, versus having the build at a standstill. So that would be the ideal, is being able to have more control over the design aspect and planning. And so we get that with prefab as well, because we're doing all the design work, because it has to work with our prefab system. We're also eliminating that cure time at the same time, because we're building and letting the material cure in a controlled environment before it ever gets to site. So when it gets to site, you can build it in hours instead of days with only a couple of people, and then you're immediately ready for finishes to be applied. So there's multiple advantages, and our goal is to be about the same price or cheaper, eventually cheaper, once we get our some more efficiencies in our process in place, as doing like a cast in place, for instance.
Amazing. So if somebody they had a piece of land and they want to have a hemp home, can they just contact you, and you already have the designs and you know, the modules to kind of instructions to just put it together? Is it that simple?
It's almost that simple. So it depends on what you want to build. So right now we're kind of in a limited production phase, where we're doing small builds, small number of panels, just to really solidify our process, and gain some efficiencies there. So we have 3 pre-designed kits. We have like a 150 square foot kit that's really like I call it like a mother-in-law suite that might go in your backyard, or like a backyard office, that kind of thing. And then we have like a 330 square foot hunter's cabin, which is like a studio almost, but it has everything you need. It's got bunk beds, kitchen, bath. And then I have a 530 square foot ADU that's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, but has like living room, those kinds of things. So those are the base options, and that's the cheapest to come into if you want just an out of the box solution, because they're already designed, and all we have to do is move it to production and make sure that we coordinate with foundation, those kinds of things. But a lot of people contact me looking for more custom, either variations of those designs, or just totally different design, which we can do as well. So people send me a picture, say, I want a structure that looks just like this. And then my job is to take that and tear it apart and build it with our panels, and then reconstruct it so it looks essentially the same. And so we can pretty much do any design. There's just minimal limitations with things like we're trying to stay at a single story for now. And that goes with the appendix as well. For building with any kind of hempcrete, it's just easier to get approval that way, versus when you go 2-story, there's a lot more considerations. So things like that are limitations, but they're pretty straightforward.
Awesome. That's exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
Really exciting. I'm glad to hear of that work, and to make it more accessible for people, right? And so how can we, I think in the conversation we had before too, we discussed a little bit about the cost factor, right? And in order to get it into the market for people to buy these homes, we also wanted to make it comparable to the products that they're already using, and to get them in, and then to show them, you know, even the benefits of building with hemp. Why are we going to use hemp versus you know, other construction materials? Maybe you can speak a little bit on that.
Yeah, so it really depends who you're talking to, because there's so many benefits to building with hemp that you kind of have to pick what is going to be your lead factor in the audience that you're trying to communicate with. And so, for instance, like the fires that happened recently in Colorado, I know that there's more pressure on some of the builders in that area, the hemp builders, that were focusing more on the fire resistance aspect, where it's like, hey, when we build back, we can build back better because we have this product right here. Like it's time for us to utilize the material we should have been using in the first place. So it really depends on where you're at, but there's a ton of benefits to switch. And so that's one of them would be the fire resistance aspect of hempcrete, which is pretty rare for a residential build these days, where pretty much everything we put in the wall is the opposite of that. It's pretty flammable. And then you have with that, you have your mold resistance, just because of the ability. So just speaking more broadly, I suppose, so when we're looking at a traditional build, the idea is to kind of seal everything from the outside, keep everything out, and everything inside is then controlled. And so we have like a vacuum inside, and then our idea is to artificially or mechanically adjust the climate inside, and if there's too much moisture, pumping all that out, vice versa. And so if that system is working flawlessly, then we have a sterile and operable indoor climate. But when those systems fail, which they inevitably do, because we can't control all of the weather or how materials are going to function long term, that's when we start to have issues. And so like over 50% of the homes in the US have mold problems, and people don't really know it, and it might not be a problem for you, but it's causing damage over time and things like so you have rotting and mold, and you have insects, those kinds of things that you don't see for a long time. But so traditional builds, this is traditional builds, and then we have hempcrete is kind of changing the approach to how we build homes, in that it's a bit more of an adaptive material. And so you're not necessarily trying to keep everything out, but you're trying to work with the environment. And so if you have excess moisture, that moisture, if it gets in the walls have the ability to shed that moisture on either side. And so that's what prevents you from having bulk moisture buildup, which leads to problems like mold, those kinds of things. And then you have a material that's pretty insulative, but also has some thermal mass. And so not only are you insulating your home and controlling that interior environment, but your walls are essentially acting as a thermal battery. And so when that sun is beating on that material, it can store that energy and dissipate that over time. And so over the course of ownership, year over year, you're going to have lower operation costs because of the efficiencies of the material.
That's amazing. You know, when you were talking about that, and I was just thinking about the breathability of hemp, right? And how it's working more with the environment, like you were explaining so well. And somebody was telling me that, you know, being in a hemp home is there's such a difference. Like you just feel like you can breathe so much more. And I haven't had that experience yet, and I'm looking forward to it. But maybe you can share. Have you felt that, like being in a build with hemp, the breathability?
Yeah, for sure. So it's just I guess I don't know how to describe it. It just feels, it's kind of calming, and maybe it's because you're already expecting that. So we built our last year, that was the build we were building in the snow, was our cabin. We have a personal cabin that's made out of hemp that we go to every weekend. And so that's been kind of our project, and unfortunately it gets neglected because I'm working on everyone else's project, but it's suitable enough for us to go and spend time and get away. But it's just like our peaceful place. It's quiet, partially because it's in the woods, but also because the hemp, like you can tell, like if my kids are outside playing and stuff, I can't really hear it because it's just like a quiet, peaceful little space inside. And then it just feels like, it smells and feels kind of just fresh. And it's, yeah, that's another piece that people don't really consider. And you don't feel it necessarily in new homes, but it's there is going to be the the off-gassing and things of the man-made materials that are going into your walls, as opposed to like a hempcrete build that's all natural materials. And so you're just going to have a healthier experience living in a building like that, as opposed to one that's got a bunch of synthetic materials in the walls.
Yeah. That's awesome. So what's next, Matt? What's next in the next, year, and then the next few years? What is your vision? What do you see happening?
So the goal is to start to get more of these structures up and around the country. So we'll be working with various people around the country to get some builds kind of spread out and get some opportunities to people so they can actually experience it. Like you said, it's nice to hear all the benefits, but to actually be in a build and experience it is it's what really makes the difference. And so starting to get some of these builds out there is our main goal. And then we'll start to scale up too. So right now we're staying kind of in that lower square footage range to get that proof of concept and get more builds out. And we hope to scale back up to, once we can, and it might not be a year, but once we can get that that interest and engagement out there, start to scale back up to the residential size homes so that we can start building out these homes.
That's so exciting. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for taking your time to be on the show and share more about what you're doing and what's happening with building with hemp. It's really exciting, and I can't wait to live in my own hemp home soon.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Rebecca.
You, Matt.
Thank you for listening to Hemp Foundation Talks. Hemp Foundation is a nonprofit social enterprise on a mission to provide solutions for our current ecological crisis. Hemp Foundation and their brand Uki has created a value chain from village farms to the marketplace, utilizing the many benefits of hemp to overcome deforestation, fight plastic pollution, and support regenerative practices to heal our earth. The foundation supports over 250 small village farmers in the Indian Himalayan region. In addition, they employ widows and women in the production of over 500 hemp products for the marketplace, from clothing to food to hemp bags, a large range of textiles, embroidered fabrics, home goods, and even hemp bioplastic. To learn more, visit hempfoundation.net.